It took me a year to come up with a plan to get revenge on the person who invaded my marriage. I'm a modest person and might seem harmless, but when it comes to my honor and dignity, I will punish the offender in the most clever and terrible way possible. After 6 years of living together, my wife and I were about to realize our plans from the beginning of our marriage. We followed a strict savings plan and had finally saved enough for a down payment on. I'm David. I run my own cybersecurity business, which allows me to work remotely. If someone asked me about my marriage with Ellie, I'd say that we love each other and are committed to our union. I'd talk about how we share secrets, enjoy a wonderful life together, and have an unshakable love. I'd also mention our financial situation and joint plans for the future. I was convinced our future was secure. There were times when we saw other couples face difficulties and divorce, but we realized our love and marriage were on a completely different level, and nothing could separate us. I wasn't thinking about it in a deliberate way, but it convinced my soul and became a belief. I was a believer. Ellie worked as a regional manager in a national tech company. The company was growing, and they transferred a new vice president from the Manhattan office, Richard Jones. He was a confident young graduate from the Ivy League who thought he was smarter than everyone else and enjoyed showing off his power and status over subordinates. That's when my belief system started to be tested. Since he arrived 3 months ago, my wife had become cold, irritable, and not particularly pleasant at home. She explained it as work stress, but I suspected something more. I tried to be a loving husband, showing patience and understanding. I tried to be a supportive husband, taking her out, buying her flowers, and trying to understand her problems. One night when she was upset, she told me about her new boss. She said Richard was a real jerk who made everyone nervous and stressed. I suggested she quit, but she said she had applied for a transfer to another department and that we needed the money for our new house. She said it wasn't the right time to leave and wanted to wait a little longer. She was pretty sure she'd be transferred soon, given her experience with the company's software and her value to the central office. Her current job meant she had to visit other branches 3 times a month, and she was hoping that she'd only have to make 1 or 2 more business trips before her transfer was approved. 6 weeks and 3 business trips later, there was still no transfer, and the stress at home was getting worse. She was treating me more like a roommate than I told my husband I wasn't happy, but she told me to stick it out and that things would improve soon. Since Rich had started treating the staff better, her colleagues at work thought that maybe the central office had informed him about the poor work environment, so they suggested he change his attitude. Ellie still Eve the transfer could happen. I noticed she was trying to be kinder at home, but she still treated me coldly, refusing to be intimate even more than twice a week. It felt more like pity than the love we once shared. One Friday night, she came home and announced that she was going on a business trip to the company's California office for 2 days with her boss, Richard Jones. She said she would find out about her transfer there. At that time, I didn't know that her stress was due to the pressure Richard was putting on her. He was insistent on being intimate with her. She was an attractive 28-year-old. A 28-year-old woman. Ellie was 7 minutes tall, slim, with a beautiful figure and an angelic face. Up until the last 3 months, she had never given me a reason to worry. I later found out that when Richard first started making advances, she rejected him, which humiliated him and damaged his ego, causing her workplace stress. It was clearly sexual harassment, but why she didn't tell me or HR remains a mystery. Once Richard realized that his direct methods weren't working, he changed tactics. He started flirting, joking, and complimenting her. After several lunches and lots of chats about her marriage and personal life, he convinced her to think about being with him at least once, saying it would help her career. The stress she was under plus the threat of betrayal turned her into someone I didn't recognize. To make the affair seem justified and hide her guilt, she started blaming me and making me look like the bad guy. We hadn't been intimate or even close for the past 2 weeks, and she wasn't interested in my advances. I wasn't begging for intimacy, but I made it clear that if things didn't change soon, we were headed for trouble. She promised that everything would return to normal soon and asked for some time to deal with her work issues. I loved her and wanted things to go back to how they were just a few months ago, but I didn't know what else to do except realize that changes were necessary. So I told her I was waiting for her to come. She just got back from her trip, so we could sort out our marriage as soon as possible. Our 7th anniversary was coming up, and I kept trying to fix things between us and rekindle her feelings before she left, but it was all in vain. The day she was supposed to leave, I came home early to surprise her with a box of her favorite chocolates for the trip. and show her how much I loved her and wanted our life to get back on track. I knew she'd taken the day off to pack and planned to leave for the airport at 3:12 p.m. I got home at noon, feeling optimistic, hoping to catch her in a Oz and tell her how much I loved her. As soon as I entered the house, I called out her name, barely crossing the threshold. To my surprise, the house was empty. Stepping into the bedroom, I saw a suitcase on the bed and an elegant dress hanging on the rack. She always dressed well and was confident and liked to look fashionable. I always admired how she looked standing alone. I called her on her mobile to find out where she was. She replied with a short, annoyed sounding hello 0000. Is there anything else I should know? I was pretty taken aback by her attitude. I just wished her a good flight and hung up without saying goodbye or telling her I loved her. We normally ended our conversations like that, so I wondered if she even noticed that she'd hurt and angered me. Sitting on the bed next to her suitcase, I tried to figure out what was going on. The way she spoke to me and treated me was unacceptable. I started to feel angry as I stared at my phone. I hadn't planned to wait for her to return home, so I decided to leave. As I stood up, my eyes landed on a purple item in her open suitcase. I'd never gone through my wife's things before, but for some reason I reached for the suitcase and pulled out a plastic bag containing a bright purple nightgown. To my horror, it was a sexy, unopened piece of lingerie. The bag also held matching purple panties. There was also a bra and some unopened garter stockings, all in purple. I hadn't worn lingerie with my wife for 2 years, so I realized she'd packed these items specifically for someone else. Everything suddenly made sense. Her attitude towards me, the lack of intimacy, the coldness, the distance. Everything had changed between us since she started going on business trips with her boss 3 months ago. I realized I had evidence of her infidelity in my hands. She had packed these things for the trip to show them to another man, very likely Richard. In an instant, I knew I no longer wanted to be a part of her games or be made a fool of. I went downstairs to my office, grabbed a sheet of paper, and wrote a short note, shaking with, I'm really angry. I hope you enjoy your sexy lingerie. Now it's clear why you've changed over the last few months. It's obvious you don't love me anymore. Don't worry, when you get home, I won't be here, and you'll never see me again. I would never have married you if I'd known you were a traitor. But as they say, live and learn. The only good thing to come out of this is that you'll never be the mother of my children. Thank God we waited to start a family. I then took a stapler from my desk, carefully opened the lingerie package, and attached the note to the delicate fabric. I put everything back in the suitcase with care, making sure not to leave any traces of my presence, and left the house. I went to a local restaurant to be alone and eat something to calm my upset stomach. I met my sister Jen for lunch because I needed to talk to someone about what I was planning. I don't know if it was guilt or fear, but I knew I could trust her as a good listener. All the tension was driving me crazy, and I needed to get it off my chest before I lost it completely. After we ordered from the menu, I confessed everything and felt relieved to have said it. I could feel Jenny's anger as she looked at me like I had lost my mind. Why would you risk your marriage for this guy you told me about? In previous conversations, he's been described as a JERK and has been harassing you for the past few months. Why not just quit or file a sexual harassment complaint with HR? Over the last month, I've gotten to know him better, and he's going through a difficult divorce. He's been unloading his pain on us, but he's been extremely kind. Over the last month, he's asked to be with me. Just once I agreed, but only once during this trip. He promised we'll never talk about it again. He also promised to help me get a promotion at the company. It's impossible. I think promotion is what's really going on here. I feel bad for Richard. She said he needs me, and besides, David will never find out. We'll go back to our normal life when I get back. I'm sorry, David is calling me. I need to answer, she added as she put her phone back in her bag. I wondered why Jenny was looking at me like that, at me with such disgust. I turned to her, irritated, and asked what was wrong. You just spoke to your husband in the rudest way possible. That was the most disrespectful thing I've seen from you. What's wrong with you? Have you lost your mind? What are you talking about, Jenny? It was just a quick call. You're picking the wrong time to criticize me. Have you realized how you spoke to David? Have you lost your senses? What's wrong with you? What are you talking about? It was just a quick call. That's all. You picked up the phone and said, what do you need? Can you imagine what my husband would do if I spoke to him like that? How did you end the conversation? Do you need anything else? No, goodbye. Your judgment is already clouded by the affair, which is putting your marriage at risk. You told me yourself that you're tired of David complaining about how bad things are between you and how you've been ignoring him. It seems like you're sabotaging your own marriage and treating your husband like trash to compensate. I can see you're feeling guilty, you're right. I've been acting like an idiot, taking my frustrations out on poor David. I need to call him back and apologize. Do you need some privacy? Stay here. He's not answering. Maybe he's busy. He always answers my calls. I'll try again. He's still not answering. I'll send him a message. He must be mad at me, and I don't blame him. I need to leave in 2 hours, sis. You better apologize and get your act together. I don't think what you've planned with Richard is a good idea. You need to stop this nonsense before you ruin everything you and David have been built. You've built up a great relationship, and we plan to start a family. Think about it. I know you're right, but I'm not sure if I can stop it. It'll just be this one time, and my life at home and work will go back to normal. Richard has so many problems with his divorce, and he's really depressed. He promised it'll only be once, and he needs me because I remind him of his wife. You realize he's manipulating you, right? You can't be that naive. I don't feel that way deep down. I think he's a good guy. His wife is trying to get full custody of the kids and ruin him with child support. When he opened up to me, I felt his pain. We got on really well, and I feel like I need to do this just this once after all the time we've spent together. Ellie, have you even talked to him about your marriage or how David treats you? Looking down at her hand, she replied quietly, maybe I mentioned that David complains and we having issues with intimacy. You're being foolish, and you'd better pray that David never finds out you're sharing your intimate matters with another man. I have to tell you, I think you've already gone too far. If David finds out about this, your marriage will definitely be in danger. Can't you see how twisted this is and how I get it? You're right. And that's why I'll only do this once I see how I've been treating David. When I get back from this trip, I'll make it up to him. He'll never know, and it won't happen again because I won't think about it. You're really deluding yourself. You're planning to sleep with another man, and you think you can just forget about it afterwards. I'm telling you, it will change you. It will change your relationship with your husband. Nothing good will come from this. Please reconsider. Thanks for your concern, but I'm going to go ahead with it, and I can handle this. It's just sex, and it'll only be this once. David will never find out, and as they say, no harm, no foul. I hope you know what you're doing, but remember my words. You're making a huge mistake. Think about it before you do something that can't be undone. You'll be forever known as a cheating wife. I hope you can live with that. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. In 2 weeks, you'll see a happy David, and we'll start working on starting a family. I'm sad and scared because I know this won't end well. As your sister, I don't want you to do this. Please cancel your trip, quit your job, and apologize to David for your recent behavior. David is my friend too. If he ever finds out that I knew, he'll never speak to me again. Thanks, Jenny. These feelings were new and unwelcome. Sitting in the booth of our local restaurant, I began reflecting on the past few months, and my marriage had gone from bliss to complete despair. I had to wipe my eyes. I had to hide my weakness and pain from anyone who might see. When I first sat down, I felt only anger, but those feelings quickly turned to sadness and agony as I realized the full weight of what I had lost. The woman I loved and the marriage I cherished were now distant memories. I felt humiliated and betrayed. How could she do this to me in our marriage? What had I done to make her turn her back on me? I knew I could never forgive her. I could never be with a woman who wanted to be with another man. My pride couldn't take it. I knew many of my friends had overcome infidelity, and some people told me to forgive her and move on, but that wasn't going to happen. My anger returned as my phone rang, showing her number. I wasn't going to take her call. Sweetheart, your loving husband has moved on. I thought Richard had reserved first-class seats for the long flight till he was hoping to impress Ellie on the West Coast, but on the plane he noticed that she seemed upset when she realized her husband wasn't answering her calls or messages. When she expressed doubts about everything, Richard quickly sensed it and played the wounded husband card to bring her back to her initial mood. I treated her to a vodka martini and convinced her to relax, assuring her that everything would be fine. Ellie, calm down. Everything's fine. I'm sure there's a good reason for this. Maybe he's in a meeting or just can't talk right now. He'll call me back. Besides, nothing has happened and everything's okay. When we get back from our meetings, I want you to take a few days off and spend time reconnecting with your husband. I wish I had a wife like you. You know, she doesn't even let me talk to my daughters, and it hurts so much. You're a wonderful wife, and I know everything will be fine. Ellie noticed a tear in the predators as he spoke about his daughters, and after the second drink, she believed him. She forgot her problems and took his hand, trying to comfort the man who seemed to be suffering. It was then that he knew she was his, and that you would be intimate with this naive woman and send her back To her husband, he'd worked too hard to let everything come this close to the finish line. It was a game for him. To send women back to their husbands carrying his seed, it was the purpose of his life for the wife to know she'd given herself to another man, and at the same time lost respect for her husband. The wife would remember what they kept it in mind when she returned to her spouse, but he enjoyed meeting the husband even more after having sex with his wife, whether at a business event or a casual encounter. When this happened, he felt an indescribable sense of power. It was drug, and he was addicted to the feelings that made him feel powerful and complete. It also made him a dangerous man around these poor, trusting women. When they arrived at the hotel in Nan, they approached the reception desk. Ellie was slightly surprised to find out that only one room was available and that she'd be spending the entire trip with him. The receptionist looked at Richard and said, "I don't have my own room. We talked about this," she continued. "You and I will be together for the whole visit, and never again, Leighton. Just enjoy this experience as we promised." "I thought you said it would only be once," Richard replied. "I'm not sure," the receptionist said. "Just relax. Everything will be fine. One visit, no more than that. Once we're home, you're my girl. Just act like my wife, and I'll treat you like the princess you deserve to be. No one will know, and it'll be our secret forever." They checked into the room, and Ellie felt guilty when she saw there was only one double bed. Since her wedding, she'd realized she'd be sleeping with other man, but at the same time excitement overwhelmed her. As the guilt began to fade, she was feeling a bit conflicted, so she stepped out onto the balcony, New York, to get some fresh air. Richard understood the situation and quietly put their bags in the closet and joined her on the balcony overlooking the Pacific Ocean. "This is really relaxing, isn't it?" he said. "I booked this room knowing you'd appreciate the ocean view." She nodded with tears in her eyes. "It's beautiful," she said. Richard turned toward her, gently placing his hand under her chin and lifting her face to look deeply into her eyes. Then he kissed her softly on the lips. After a few seconds, she responded to his kiss, which turned into a romantic and passionate embrace. She was starting to realize what she'd just done that, so she gently pushed him away and smiled. Richard knew he'd made progress and didn't want to rush. He was confident that in a few hours they'd be alone, and then he planned to spend the whole night with her, showing her his passion. While her unsuspecting husband was far away, he felt a wave of satisfaction and smiled back at her. "All right, we have dinner in a couple of hours, and I know you'll want to get ready, so I'll head to the gym." For she nodded, watching as Richard grabbed his workout gear and left the room. She needed to talk to David and make sure everything was okay. Now that she realized how she had treated him, she wanted to apologize and ensure he was all right. She loved him and just wanted this trip to be over so she could return to her normal life. Her heart raced as her phone started to ring, and she was hoping he'd answer and tell her he loved her. But there was no reply. He hadn't picked up the call, and she knew he was still angry about their last conversation, so she sent him a text message to try to smooth things over. The message read, "David, my dear, I'm so sorry for the way I spoke to you during our call today. I had a difficult morning, and I took it out on you. Please forgive me, and I'll make it up to you when I get home. I miss you. I really appreciate it, and want you to know that I love you. I'm really looking forward to starting a family with you this weekend. Please give me a call. I'd like to hear your voice." She stepped into a hot shower, shaved her legs and intimate areas, and washed her hair. When she got out of the shower, she admired herself in the full-length mirror. She was excited at the thought of wearing the new outfit she had bought for this event. She spent the next 30 minutes carefully doing her hair makeup. She was happy with her look and the way her long hair looked. She'd forgotten to send David a message. She tried on the new outfit and liked how it looked on her. Then she thought about David and how she'd wear the same outfit for him. When she got back, Richard was on the treadmill. When Ellie opened her suitcase and took out a short, she picked out a black cocktail dress, a bold choice that she'd picked out especially for this trip. It accentuated her beautiful chest with a daring neckline. She decided to be bold and not wear a bra that night. The short skirt was meant to further highlight her long legs. She'd bought some new high heels for the trip. After admiring the dress for a few moments, she went for lingerie and took out several items, including the lingerie she'd planned to wear Richard that night. She carefully laid everything out on the bed, then unpacked a pair of sheer black stockings and slid them over her long, smooth legs. She followed this with the new black thong, which she carefully slipped into the dress, and then her high heels. After adjusting the dress to ensure her firm, round chest was properly covered, she stepped in front of the full-length mirror, admiring the sexy woman staring back at her. She smiled again with satisfaction, knowing how she looked at herself in the mirror and thought about how much her husband would love to see her in this dress. She imagined him making love to her. When she got home, she glanced at the clock and saw that Richard would be back in a few minutes. She started tidying up and went back to the bed. She went to put away the sexy lingerie she planned to wear that night. She carefully placed it back in the closet so she could quickly change when they returned on her way home from dinner. She picked up the Victoria's Secret bag and noticed that it had been opened and the items inside were out of order. This strange detail puzzled her, so she looked through the contents. She found the delicate items and saw a handwritten note attached to the lingerie. Confused, she read the note and immediately froze in fear. Her heart stopped as she realized the meaning of the note. The weight of her actions hit her with incredible force. She stood there stunned, unable to move, staring at the note, now feeling unimaginable pain and suffering she couldn't comprehend. Suddenly, a flood of tears erupted from her eyes as she collapsed to her knees. Covering her face with her hands, she lay on the carpet sobbing, experiencing a pain and torment she couldn't fathom. Overcome with panic, she called David's phone and left a shaky voicemail. "David, I got your message, darling. Nothing happened. I didn't do anything. It was a stupid mistake. And I love you. Please forgive me. We need to talk. Please call me back when you can." When she realized he wasn't calling her back, she sent several long text messages. Now she rocked back and forth in large chair by the bed when Richard walked into the room. Seeing the complete mess, he realized that something was about to ruin his plans. "What happened, dear? Don't call me that. I'm not your dear. Because of you, you might have ruined my marriage," she said, pointing at the note on the bed. Richard smiled as he read it. He understood that Ellie's husband had discovered her plans once again. He felt that familiar sense of satisfaction from playing with the husband's mind. This was what he lived for. Tempting other men's wives and turning them into cheaters was his addiction. The need to dominate these women and their husbands was his drug. "Calm down, Ellie. Your husband thinks you've slept with me, so let's take advantage of the situation and enjoy it. Are you crazy? If you think I'm going to touch you again, you're wrong. I need to go home to my husband and fix the mess you've caused." Angry at not getting what he wanted, he snapped back, "Sure, blame it all on me. Look at the outfit you were about to wear for our special night. It practically screams. Please take me. You're an idiot. If you think you did, you enjoy that kiss. Come on, admit it. You wanted more." Ellie stared at him in shock at his outburst. Then she realized he was right. The decision had been hers alone. She had blamed Richard for everything, but she now realized she could have stopped at any moment. Even her sister had warned her. But she chose to leave her husband and be with Richard at that moment. She wasn't sure what hurt more, the realization that Richard had been right about her, or the fact she was consumed with remorse and guilt at having hurt her husband. She quickly gathered her belongings and went down to the lobby to ask the concierge for help booking an early morning flight home. She needed to return and tell David how much she loved him. After 20 minutes on the phone, it turned out there were no seats available on the evening flights. She would have to stay in San Diego until morning to fly home, arriving around 6 o'clock. "I'll be leaving at 12 a.m. It was too late, but she had no other option. She asked the concierge to book her a room, handing over her credit card. She sat down alone, thinking about the last 3 months David had written about in his letter. She realized that she had indeed become a distant wife and had treated David terribly. Because of her guilt, she was really starting to stress out when she saw the expression on the concierge's face. "I'm sorry, Miss Gay, but your card has been declined. Do you have another one?" "Oh my God, this can't be happening." She tried another card, but it didn't work either. She swallowed her pride and called her sister. "Hi, Jenny, I'm sorry to bother you." But she broke down crying as soon as Jenny answered. "I should have listened to you, but I didn't. I found a note from David in my bag, and he realized and left me. I'm stuck here, try to get home, but he's blocked our joint cards and I can't pay for the room. I wish you'd been more careful, Ellie. I haven't been as careful as I should have been lately. I'll help you." An hour later, Ellie, Jenny called. "I've managed to book you a room for the night. You'll fly home on the morning flight. Do you think he'll forgive me?" "I'm not sure. Have you heard anything from him?" "No, but I left him a few messages and told him nothing happened. I hope he listens. I don't think he'll give you another chance. Good luck with that. It doesn't look good that you knew what you were doing and still went ahead with it. On the trip, keep trying to reach him and beg for his forgiveness. If you really want him back, I pray he listens." I didn't know she'd continued her relationship with Richard, but it was obvious that she had planned to do so. And that was enough for me. She said she loved me, but went to another man with the intention of seducing him. I wasn't going to start a family with a woman like that. So I turned off my phone, moved out of our apartment, and left for Austin, Texas, where I had several job offers, I also changed my relationship status. I changed my Facebook status to single and posted a picture created with AI of an unfaithful couple using there. Shared photos captioning it the new love of Ellie Richard Jones. I also filed for divorce. An hour later, there were dozens of comments from shocked friends. Some women expressed their condolences and offered to talk if I needed support. It was strange, but for the first time in months, I felt wanted. I realized my life hadn't ended because of my wife's infidelity. Through my research, I found out that Richard wasn't actually going through a divorce. He loved his wife and kids, but he enjoyed seducing innocent women a little too much. He thrived on new and defiling other men's wives and turning their husbands into couples. It was an addiction and a need to dominate these women and their husbands, making him a dangerous man. Mr. Wills, where was your client on the day of the divorce hearing that he missed? David was supposed to appear in court on the day of the divorce, but when he didn't show up and the judge was pretty mad about it, he asked his lawyer Joshua if he knew where David was. Joshua said he didn't, but he was sure David would show up soon. The judge told Joshua to call David again in 15 minutes if David didn't show up. The judge said he would issue a contempt of court warrant. The lawyer told him he wasn't planning on going to the hearing. He explained that it would be better for him if he did, but David wasn't keen. He said he'd go to the counseling sessions if it meant the divorce would be quicker. It was the first time David had seen Ellie after her misguided decision, rushed towards him with open arms, only to be pushed aside and ignored. After composing herself following a burst of tears, the counseling session began. Ellie started by telling the counselor how much she loved David, how sorry she was, and that she didn't understand what she had done. She explained that she and Richard hadn't slept together and that she'd gone home. As soon as she realized her mistake, she cried and begged for forgiveness. When it was David's turn to speak, he started with a question. Doctor, just to be clear, you expect total honesty from both of us if these sessions are to have any value, right? The counselor agreed that honesty was crucial. Ellie, is it true that nothing sexual happened between you and Richard? Ellie replied, yes, David. When I read your letter, I realized what I was doing and came home immediately. David said, I understand, Ellie, but I know you're not the kind of woman who would be with another man unless you had feelings for him. She realized she had to admit to having feelings or agree she was being frivolous. She responded, well, yes, but I don't love him. I only love you, Ellie. Why? Oh, you and I both knew you wouldn't have been with another man if you didn't have feelings for him. So tell me, did you two spend time alone, have lunch together, go out after work? Unable to look him in the eyes, Ellie quietly responded, yes, we spent time together. Then you admit you had feelings for him. Tell me, did you ever hold hands? Ellie, she couldn't bear to look at him anymore and whispered, yes, fine, you've admitted to having feelings for him. David couldn't explain what happened next, but all his pain, anger, resentment, and humiliation came out in tears. Seeing him cry like that had an unexpected effect on Ellie. David wiped his eyes and asked Ellie one last question. If I hadn't left that note in your suitcase, would you have slept with him that night? Ellie didn't want to answer and sat there looking at the counselor nervously. Finally, with tears in her eyes, she said she would have. I swear I didn't love him, only you. David turned to the counselor and said, doctor, this is why I can't stay in this marriage. She intended to sleep with him, and that's all that matters to me. If she was willing to do it once, I know she would do it again under the right circumstances. I can't live with that. After all this time, I still couldn't stop wondering if she wanted him again or if she was planning another encounter. Many of my friends told me to forgive her and move on, but I couldn't do that. I couldn't be with a woman who wanted to be with another man. I just couldn't take it. After attending the required counseling sessions for 3 weeks, the divorce was finalized. However, Ellie, her father, her sister, and her friends continued to call and ask him to stop the divorce. They all told him he was being foolish because nothing had actually happened between Ellie and Richard. He said he was acting like a child and needed to take responsibility and reconcile with her. He was tired of hearing about how his small ego was getting in the way of reconciliation. He eventually told them all to leave him alone and cut off contact with them. He then accepted several contract jobs across the country, left town, and never looked back. Ellie continued calling and begging for forgiveness, and eventually he had to block her number. He thought she had finally understood and would move on, finding another man. He hoped she had learned her lesson and would be faithful in her future relationships. Almost a year had passed since that awful day. He never forgot about little Richard. That's when he started putting his revenge plan into action. Before he left town, he set up remote access to the home computer which allowed him to log into Ellie's system. She had a habit of coming home from work, connecting to the corporate VPN, and sending reports. Once she was done, she would simply close her laptop, thinking the system was off. He took advantage of the lack of security on her laptop by remotely accessing her system while it was still connected to the corporate network through the VPN. You've got to love lazy employees who prefer to take the easy route was to not worry about security, but I digress. He opened her email and sent a message with a road kit embedded in a link which Richard would later click on. The email appeared to come from Ellie and said, "Richard, take a look at these pictures and tell me how I look." Unable to resist such an email from Ellie, Richard would click the link which activated the malware. He only saw an error message, but he would try several times before realizing the link didn't work. He would ask Ellie about it the next day. As expected, the prey took the bait, granting David remote access to Richard's. I got hold of a laptop, and when the IT department reviewed it, they just ignored the report and moved on to more urgent matters. I waited a week before I started using VPNs and remote servers in 8 different countries. I installed several programs on Richard's company's main server to help me complete my task. Within hours, I had access to his most valuable files, downloading the company's financial reports, HR, payrolls, engineering plans, and patent approval projects. I also got hold of patents that could potentially cost the company millions. Then I decided to have a little fun with Richard through his work computer. I registered him on several adult websites, including 2 on the dark web. It was easy to use his banking and credit card information without his knowledge. I set up a program to redirect any messages from these sites to a hidden folder on his computer, which only I had access to. In this hidden folder, I uploaded dozens of images, videos, and sensitive information, including confidential company documents and engineering plans. I started my campaign to burn Richard. Over the following month, I used his corporate email account to send various documents to his company's main competitors with a note asking when the payments would be made. I was going to transfer the money to his account. Richard was hired for his financial expertise, not his technical skills. Like most newcomers, he thought that once emails and files were deleted, all traces would disappear. But with any type of investigation, the evidence would be easy to find. I also paid one of my employees to plant a USB drive containing dozens of prohibited files in Richard's apartment. It took them less than 2 days to find a way to enter and install the device. All of this was part of my plan. Throughout the process, I was careful to use VPNs, remote servers, and my cyber security expertise to erase any possible. 10 days after the FBI stormed Richard's office while he was in a meeting with the company president, the armed agents burst in shouting, "FBI!" Nobody moved. The entire office froze. "We have an arrest warrant for Richard Jones and full access to your company servers. We have information regarding the commission of federal crimes. Please accompany us to the IT department." Immediately, reluctantly, the president directed 2 FBI agents to follow him to the IT department. Despite the president's objections, the FBI seized the company's servers and all its data, leaving the business complex completely. When the news broke, competitors pounced, calling clients and spreading the word about Richard's misdeeds. I had effectively destroyed the company Richard worked for, and he was fired and prosecuted. Richard's case received a lot of media coverage, and the company he worked for found itself in a tough spot. It might not survive the fallout from his actions. The scandal ruined the company's reputation and turned Richard into a national laughingstock. He was convicted on 200 charges, including possession of child pornography, wire fraud, corporate espionage, federal theft, and extortion. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. His wife filed for divorce, and his children cut off all contact with him. He lost everything by messing with the wrong person. As a side note, Ellie was caught up in the scandal after her relationship with Richard became public. The story was published on several major national news websites. For some reason, those sites went viral, and the story spread online for a week. Headlines told the tale of an unfaithful wife and her relationship with a convicted pedophile arrested on Valentine's Day. A hacker gave Ellie a nickname in the article's Happy Valentine's Day. Ellie, her photo, home address, workplace, and details of her divorce were made public. She couldn't go anywhere without hearing insults or receiving judgmental looks. I started a new life from scratch. Story 2. Let me start at the beginning. Ellie and I have been together for over 10 years, but we've only been married for 7. We met in high school and have been together ever since. She was the only woman I'd ever been with, and I thought she was the only woman he'd ever been with. We've had a good life together. We have raised 3 children, own our own home, and even have a vacation home in Florida that we go to every summer. It was almost like we were living the American dream as we've been focused on our kids. Our sex life has sort of diminished. It wasn't completely inactive, but it wasn't as vibrant as either of us probably hoped it could be. She was always exhausted after taking care of the kids, and after long days in the office, I was also tired. I started to notice that she was acting differently. She had never been someone to care a lot about her physical appearance. I thought she was naturally beautiful, and I loved everything about her. She didn't have to wear makeup around me or dress nicely. I thought she was stunning with a clean face and sweatpants. However, she started going to the gym and was petite after having 3 kids. She had more curves. I guess she wanted to try to lose that weight. I never encouraged her to go. She was my wife, and I loved her. My wife, and I loved her, and the changes in her body were from carrying our children inside of her. I didn't mind, and she was dressing up more. She was wearing nice dresses and newer clothes, which reminded me of what she wore when we first started at ING. I asked her about it, and she just told me that it was to help her feel more confident in herself. I took that explanation to heart because she had never done anything like that before. I assumed she just needed a little boost, so I didn't think much of it. A few weeks later, though, I noticed that she was very secretive with her phone. I had read way too many other Reddit stories to feel comfortable with how sketchy she was being with her phone, so I asked her about it. She told me that I was overreacting and that I didn't want to ask her to see it because I didn't want to cause an argument about not trusting her. She unlocked it and handed it to me, but I thought that was enough, so I just shook my head and apologized. One night, she told me that she was going to a book club that a local bookstore was hosting and left. I thought that she might be gone for maybe 2 hours, but she didn't come back until 4 hours later. When I asked her where she was, she just told me she'd gone out for drinks with a couple of the girls. I was curious, so I checked the bookstore's website and found out that they didn't have a book club meeting on the calendar. I'd had enough of her lies, so I figured if she wasn't going to tell me the truth, I would find out for myself. My gut was telling me there was something wrong. I looked online and found a private investigator. I got in touch with an investigator via email, and they agreed to take on my case. About a week later, she came back to me with the exact same story about the book club. I emailed the investigator and told him right away about the chance to catch her, so he jumped on the opportunity to see what she was doing. I stayed home waiting for news from the investigator. My wife came home over 4 hours later. After I got a call from the investigator, I went outside to take the call. He told me that he followed my wife to a house where a man greeted her by kissing her on the lips. They stayed inside for several hours. He was able to look up the owner of the house and found out his name. He also found pictures that the man had posted on a kink forum online. The more he looked into his followers, people reacting to his posts, and she found a profile that belonged to my wife. The more shocked and heartbroken I was also alarmed at how she would meet some random man off the internet and ruin our marriage by being with him. I needed to see what was going on between them, so I waited for my wife to go to sleep and logged into her computer to try to as luck would have it, she was already logged in, so I didn't have to do much hacking. I didn't know if the man she gone to sleep with was the only one, but there were many other explicit message chains between her and strange men. I gathered screenshots of the most explicit parts, especially the parts where she'd been sending pictures of herself to these men. There was no chance of reconciliation. After this, she'd thrown away our marriage for some meaningless fling. It was unforgivable. We had a family reunion coming up in a couple of weeks, so I thought that would be the best time to tell her about the news. If she was going to throw away our marriage, I was going to make sure she would regret it. The weeks passed, and I was just staying late at work and trying to avoid her as much as possible. It was hard. I had the divorce papers ready by the time the family reunion came around. My wife had been having conversations with other men, so I decided it was time to leave. I stood up and asked everyone for their attention. I turned to my wife and told her I was leaving. I handed her the divorce papers and told her I'd found messages she'd exchanged with one of the men she'd been chatting with online. I also told her I had reason to believe she'd been unfaithful. She was really upset and tried to explain that she'd never been unfaithful and that the messages were just from her. I was curious about certain things she swore up and down she never acted on. When I brought up her kissing another man at their house, she was silent. We went through the divorce filing process, and she didn't ask for anything from me. If she had, she wouldn't have been awarded it because she was the one who cheated. The divorce was entirely her fault. She ended up moving in with her grandma and helping her get around. We have joint custody of the kids, but They tend to want to spend more time with me. My private investigator was able to do some digging on the man as well. It turned out he was married and had several children of his own. I considered not getting involved, but it was the right thing to do. I found his wife and showed her some of the evidence of their affair. She ended up leaving him. She kept the house, the kids, and sure, getting spousal support from him. Now I'm trying to figure out how to get back into the dating scene. I've only dated one woman, and it ended pretty badly. This is a story about a difficult divorce following the discovery of infidelity in the marriage the main character faced. Tough decisions and emotional trials, he chose to end the marriage and move forward with his life despite the painful circumstances.